So for today's solar system artwork, you're going to need a paper and pencil and various size circle containers for tracing. And then I'm going to show you how to do it with crayons. But if you have chalk pastels and black paper and a white crayon, you can create a really nice vibrant artwork that way. To do it with chalk pastels, instead of using your pencil to trace on the white paper, you'll trace these objects with a white crayon on your black or dark blue paper, then color and shade with your chalk pastels and use the white crayon or white paint or a white gel pen to make some stars and comets. But I'm going to show you how to do this with regular paper, pencil, and crayons today, since most of us have those at home. You could also do it with paints or markers, colored pencils, whatever you like. So the largest thing in our solar system art is going to be the sun. So I'm going to use my largest shape and set that on my paper with my non-drawing hand and hold it firm and then trace with my pencil. Now I have my sun going off the edge of the paper because if I did this, there wouldn't be much space for the rest of my planets. So I'm finished with this large tracer now. The next largest planet would be Jupiter. So I'm going to, I think I'll use this one for Jupiter. And he's kind of in the middle of the order of all the planets. So I'll put him here. And then Saturn is pretty large as well. So let's see, this is a little bit smaller. So I'll put Saturn here. Saturn is a little bit farther from the sun than Jupiter, so you can see that's a little farther. Now Saturn is the one with rings. So to make our rings, I'm going to draw a line across Saturn, overlapping the edges of the circle, and then I'm going to make kind of like a J or a U shape at each end of that line. And then I can make the rings bigger, like so. Okay, now all of our other planets are a little bit smaller. So for the closest to Earth is Mercury, and that's one of the smallest planets. I'm sorry, the closest to the sun, not Earth. Closest to the sun is Mercury. So there's Mercury. And Venus is a little bit larger, a little farther from the sun. And Mars is next farthest out. And then Earth. So I'm going to put Earth right here. So I hold it still with one hand and trace all the way around with the other. And then we already did Jupiter and Saturn. So we've got two more smaller planets out here. Uranus and Neptune. Okay, my line's got a little bit messy out there, so I used pencil so I can just erase any extra lines or mistakes that I made. And now we're finished with our tracers and we're ready to color. So like I said, you can use regular crayons, you could use paints, you could use oil pastels, markers, colored pencils, whatever you wish. So starting with the sun, we usually make it kind of orange and yellow. So I'm going to color it mostly yellow. And I'll show you in a second how you can blend with your crayons. You don't have to leave one plain color. So I'm going to color the whole shape with the lightest shade that I'm using for this one. In this case it's yellow. And then I can go back with some orange and create some shading around the edges to make it look more rounded. So if you go around the edges of your shape with a darker color, it will give it more of a three-dimensional effect. So the sun has all these gases. It's a big fiery ball of gas, and sometimes they kind of flare out into the atmosphere a little. So I'm going to draw some of those little rays flaring out into outer space like that. Okay, so next closest to the sun we have Mercury. And I'll do some yellows and reds and oranges for that one. So I'm going to start with yellow and color the whole planet yellow. And then I can go back, and the part that is farthest from the sun is going to be the darkest side of my planet. So I'm going to make kind of a C, backward C, opposite of the sun, and color that a darker color than the rest of the planet. And I'm going to leave a bright yellow spot there where the sun is hitting the planet, and that makes it look more three-dimensional. So that was Mercury. Now for Venus, the next closest to the sun, I'm going to use some tans and browns and yellows. So I'm going to start with the yellow. Color the whole planet lightly with the yellow. And then I'm going to shade the darker parts with some brown and gray. So here's the sun, so I'm going to shade in a backward C, starting around the edges and coming in making a shadow side and a highlight side. So this highlight part is going to stay very light yellow, and I'm going to press a little harder with my brown in the part of Venus that's farther away from the sun, where it would be in shadow. So I'm going to do each of the planets this way. Next would be Mars, so that's going to be a lot of orange and red. Okay, so now we have Earth. So I'm going to do little bits of white clouds and see if those will stay white as I'm working. And I'm going to use some blues and some greens for Earth today. So I'll start over here closest to the sun. I'm going to do some light greens and light blues in the highlight part of this sphere. And then my blues and greens will get darker over here on the shadowed side, the side farthest from the sun. I'm working with some really basic crayon colors. You might have a 64 or bigger pack of crayons, so you can use more colors than this and blend them to make really nice, colorful, three-dimensional planets on your art. So there's Earth, and next is this big guy, Jupiter. So I'm going to do some bands of gray and brown on Jupiter. I'm going to leave the part facing the sun a nice light grayish brown, and then I'll get darker on the side farther from the sun. Okay, so I'm going to do Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune just the same way, making three-dimensional shapes for those. Now I'm going to the darkest part of each planet and just outlining it with a black crayon. I think this just kind of makes it pop and appear a little bit more round and three-dimensional. So I'm not using the black on the side of the circle that's closer to the sun. I'm only using it on the side that's farther from the sun. Oh, my crayon broke, but look, it still works. Okay, so now we've colored in all of the planets in our solar system. For the background, you could use markers, crayons, watercolors, any kind of paint you like. And if you're using watercolors, I want to show you a trick. If you take a white crayon and make some stars, maybe a comet every once in a while, when you go to paint over with your watercolors, the paint won't stick to all those little white dots you made, and you'll have a sky full of stars. You do need to press a little bit hard to make this watercolor resist work, and it is difficult to see where you have already made marks. So to save time for my demonstration, I'm using some liquid watercolors, and I've got this nice dark bluish black color, kind of a grayish blue, and you can see how anywhere I've used a crayon, whether it's on the planets or for stars in the sky, the wax from the crayon just pushes that watercolor right away. Now if you're using acrylic or tempera paints, this won't work as well. So you can always go back over it with a white paint once your dark blue sky has dried. That's if you're using acrylic or tempera. And if you forgot to make these white stars, or you didn't have a white crayon, after your watercolor sky is dry, you could also go back over it with white. If you have some white acrylic or tempera paint, you could go back over the watercolors with that. Another fun thing is if you have a white jelly pen, that makes some really nice stars too. I love using watercolor with crayons or with oil pastels because, as you can see, I can be a little bit faster and almost a little sloppy where things overlap, and the crayon or oil pastel will just push that watercolor paint out of its way. Alright, so there you can see my colorful solar system with 8 planets in the sun. And again, I really liked doing this with chalk pastel on a black or dark blue paper. I think that makes a really colorful artwork as well, but crayons and maybe a little bit of watercolor paint also have a great result. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you again next time at BRAHM.